There is something appealing about violent paintings. You've been looking at Gentileschi's Judith slaying Holofernes, but I could also show you Goya's Saturn devouring his son, both incredibly violent paintings. Goya also painted this, the 3rd of May, 1808. It's also an incredibly violent painting depicting executions. Some are about to happen, and some have happened already. A couple of decades later, in 1876, Edouard Manet would paint the execution of Emperor Maximilian, and this time, we see the smoke coming out of the executioner's barrels. We're witnessing the execution the very second it happened. Only a year later, an extremely famous artist whose fame has now dwindled since would paint another execution. This is Jean-Léon Gérôme's The Execution of Marshall Ney. Before we get into it, again this week, the support on Patreon has been absolutely amazing with 14 new patrons. I'm really touched by all of you who are taking the time to sign up and donate. If you like these videos, for $1 or more per month, your name will be featured in the credits at the end of each video. That's 25 cents per video or only $12 per year. It doesn't sound like much, but it does help out tremendously. Thank you so much. You may not know who Jean-Léon Gérôme is, despite how renowned he was during his time, and the reason for that is because he was an academic painter. Academic painting really fell out of fashion by the 20th century, and most of its contributors were pretty much forgotten by the general public. In 1868, Gérôme painted The Execution of Marshall Ney. The title reveals pretty much everything we need to know. In a dark, ominous scenery, a man, Marshall Ney, has been executed against a wall. The executioners are leaving. The body of Marshall Ney lays in the mud. On this wall can be seen the slogan Vive l'Empereur, which in French means Long live the Emperor, crossed out. Next to it, you see Vive interrupted by bullet holes. It's a striking image. But why? There's nothing groundbreaking here. There's not even blood to add to the spectacle. It's a pretty straightforward painting. To understand why this image is striking, perhaps we could look at why it was controversial. Because yes, this painting was controversial. Marshall Ney was a very respected marshal for Napoleon, who would himself call him the bravest of the brave. When Napoleon abdicated in 1814, Ney would then turn his allegiance to the Bourbon monarchy. A year later, on December 7, 1815, accused of plotting Napoleon's return, the Bourbons executed him by firing squad. 53 years after his execution, Ney was still respected by the French, who saw it disrespectful to depict such a character laying face flat in the mud. If at least he could have been standing moments before, or like Manet, during the execution, we would have seen Ney in all his dignity, he who refused to wear a blindfold and who gave the soldiers the order to shoot. But there's no dignity here, perhaps because there's no dignity in executions. However, I don't believe that this controversy helps us understand why this image is striking. Most people today don't really care for who Marshall Ney is. If you do, please let me know in the comments. To really understand why this painting is, at the very least to me, oddly staggering despite its appearance, I want to look at some other paintings by Gérôme. There are 3 fascinating images to go through, so let's start with the oldest one. The Duel After the Masquerade, made in 1857, over a decade before Gérôme's execution painting. We are, again, set in a dark, ominous scenery, despite the white snow covering the ground. A man dressed up as a clown, or as Pierrot, is dying, or is seriously wounded. Another man dressed as a Native American, his dueling opponent, walks away. They just finished dueling after a costumed masquerade ball, which adds a bit of oddity to the scene. It's a beautiful scene which has an element in common with the Execution of Marshall Ney. If you're not sure what it is, let's go to the second painting. Exactly 10 years after the duel after the masquerade, Gérôme painted Jerusalem. This painting, like the other two I've showed, seems innocuous, perhaps more so than the others. It's easy to dismiss this painting as just another boring landscape with the city of Jerusalem in the distance, as I first did when I saw this painting. However, this work lives in the bottom right corner of the composition. There lies 3 shadows of crucified men. The crucifying Romans walk away. If you don't see a resemblance with the Execution of Marshall Ney, that's fine. Perhaps this last painting will make it more obvious. The Death of Caesar, made the same year as Jerusalem in 1867. In it, you see a group of men in white togas holding up their knives, exiting the scene, leaving Caesar dead in the foreground at the bottom left of the composition. As the Walters Art Museum states, characteristically, Gérôme has depicted not the incident itself, but its immediate aftermath. In the Death of Caesar, you see the aftermath of violence, with the perpetrators exiting the scene. In Jerusalem, the aftermath of the violence is suggested through shadows, and you also see the perpetrators exiting the scene. In the duel after the masquerade, you also see the aftermath of violence, and the perpetrator is walking away. In the Execution of Marshall Ney, Gérôme depicts once again the aftermath of violence with the executioners walking off in the distance. It's a recurring pattern in Gérôme's paintings, especially in this period of his career, and I believe it's the reason why this painting is so striking. I believe there's value in showing an execution before it's made, to show the fear and the anticipation of such a cruel act. I also believe there's value in showing an execution happening, seeing the trigger pulled by the assailants. And I believe there's value in showing an execution after it happened. You don't get to see the fear or the apprehension of the victim, which may help to denounce the barbarity of such a practice, but you get to see the lack of dignity, the disrespect for human life. There's a disquieting silence in this painting. It's too quiet. Killing this man was perhaps too easy, and silence shouldn't be what we're hearing, yet it is. Time is suspended. A man is dead. His body is left alone, laying there in the mud, and there's silence, a deafening silence. Let me know what you think in the comments. I read each and every one of them. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you Axel, Mike Wex, Roman Brandel, Russell Chinchilla, and to all my other patrons for supporting the channel. If you also want to help out, leave a like, subscribe, and check out patreon.com/thecanvas. Thank you.